With a final, resolute step, Father Edmund fixed his deep-set, honey-colored gaze on the distant tower settlement, emerging just as the whispering winds had foretold. Rogues bustled to and fro, their movements the pulsing veins of commerce, their shared wisdom and discoveries, the very currency and lifeblood of the master plane. Despite the veneer of tranquility, a growing sense of purpose swelled within him with each step closer. He knew with a certainty that bordered on a predestination that he had come to the right place. As he strode forward, his austere demeanor unwavering, Father Edmund's black robe, adorned with a striking vertical golden stripe inscribed with enigmatic black runes, billowed slightly in the wind. His presence was a stark contrast to the rough landscape around him. He passed by dozens of ruffians, their menacing glares barely registering in his focused mind. Their large, mangy horses snorted and stamped, mirroring their master's barely restrained aggression. Among this motley crew, his eyes were drawn to a formidable figure, a large, muscular woman seated atop her horse like a queen upon a throne of war. Her skin was battle-worn, and her heavily scarred body was clad in an eclectic armor, an amalgamation of spoils from past conquests. A chain shirt peeked out from beneath torn furs, and a solitary metal shoulder pad lay over boiled leathers, speaking of countless battles endured and won. Her intense gaze, like his, was fixed on the tower, a silent acknowledgement of the gravity that drew them both to this nexus. He avoids any further contact with the lot. Balance must be restored, Father Edmund murmured to himself, a mantra that fortified his resolve. In this harsh landscape, where power and peril walked hand in hand, he stood as a guardian of equilibrium, driven by a faith that demanded nothing less than the universe's harmony. Several hefty logs, each hewn with precision, were methodically rolled into the expansive shed adjacent to the bakery's roaring furnace. Skinny, his mind perpetually adrift in a sea of philosophical musings, offered a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes and nodded to the bakery's proprietor. The man, Darren Longswift, bore the marks of a life etched in both discipline and Tao. His skin, toughened like leather and marked with scars of past battles, now carried a softer edge, a testament to his more recent peaceful trade. Darren, once a general commanding respect and fear in equal measure, now wielded a baker's peel with the same authority he once held with an axe. He slammed the shed door with a finality that echoed his military precision, reassured that the furnace would burn fiercely for many months to come. With a gesture that spoke of camaraderie, born from shared values, he beckoned Skinny to follow him towards the furnace, where the day's last loaves awaited their final transformation. Skinny, taller than most, and carrying his slightly muscular frame with an air of absent-minded grace, trailed behind. His classic Caesar haircut, a small nod to the order and structure he valued, contrasted with the faint lines of laughter etched around his eyes. Despite his nickname, which now seemed almost ironic, the generous portions of fresh, hot bread that Darren habitually offered ensured that Skinny's dad bod was well maintained. Darren, his medium-length brown hair now streaked with strands of white and gray, tied back into a practical ponytail, moved with a purpose that belied the additional weight he carried. The scars and muscle that lay beneath his slightly softened exterior were reminders of a life once lived on the battlefield, now replaced by the warmth and comfort of the bakery. His kindness extended only to those who respected the peace and law he held dear, a tough but fair ethos that had seamlessly transitioned from his military career to his current, more tranquil vocation. As they approached the furnace, the aroma of baking bread filled the air, a simple yet profound pleasure that seemed to momentarily lift Skinny from his deep contemplations. The promise of fresh bread was enough to make anyone's stomach grumble in anticipation, a small but significant joy in a world where such comforts were not always guaranteed. As Lazuli concluded her trade with the toxin dealers, the atmosphere around the settlement's threshold shifted palpably. The peculiar cart, brimming with clanking vials and hissing snakes, had already drawn curious glances. But now a sense of unease rippled through the onlookers. The toxin dealer's viper familiar, which had been relatively calm during the transaction, suddenly tensed, its behavior shifting to one of alarm and horror. Lazuli, sensing the change, turned her attention away from the cart. Her gaze fell upon a new arrival, a figure whose very presence seemed to cast a shadow over the bustling settlement. It was a sinister rogue, moving with a purposeful stride that suggested confidence and danger. The rogue was not alone. Flanking him were tall, towering mercenaries. They were an intimidating sight, their lanky forms draped in armor and armed with an array of crude, filthy bladed weapons that spoke of many battles and little care for cleanliness or upkeep. The rogue and his entourage moved through the settlement, their presence commanding attention and instilling a sense of foreboding. The onlookers, who moments ago had been casually perusing the carts and stalls, now gave the group a wide berth, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. Whispers and murmurs spread among the crowd, speculating about the identity of this ominous newcomer and his heavily armed companions. Lazuli watched them intently, her instincts as a seasoned warrior alerting her to the potential threat they posed. She knew that in a place like this, filled with all manner of travelers and mercenaries, one must always be wary of the unknown. The rogue's arrival could mean many things, but none of them boded well for the peace of the settlement. With a cautious hand on her weapon, she prepared herself for whatever might unfold next, her eyes never straying from the dark figure and his menacing entourage as they continued their ominous procession through the settlement. Ev Stormsore, a figure as enigmatic as the shadows he moved through, navigated the bustling outskirts of the tower settlement with a predator's grace. Vaulting effortlessly across the rooftops of moving caravans, his movements were a fluid dance, each leap and bound carrying him closer to his destination. The backs of unsuspecting beasts of burden served as mere stepping stones in his silent, aerial journey. It had been some time since Ev last set foot through these gates, and the memories of his previous visit lingered like a bitter aftertaste. The badge of the Weeping Skull, embroidered prominently on his shoulder, was a symbol that carried weight, a weight he wasn't quite ready to bear again so soon. His attire, ale black and reminiscent of a shadowy ninja, melded seamlessly with the blood-red scarf that obscured all but his piercing eyes. Ev's approach to the settlement was marked by a calculated patience, a testament to his cunning nature. Despite his taciturn demeanor, there was an undercurrent of compassion that guided his actions, a silent oath to causes greater than himself. As he perched atop the cargo of a cart awaiting entry, his muscular yet lean frame was poised in a state of readiness. His shoulder-length braids, momentarily still in the brief respite, hinted at the storms he had weathered and those he was yet to face. The tavern was abuzz with anticipation, the air thick with the aromas of exotic spices and the warmth of the hearth. At the heart of this culinary tempest stood Willem Toth, the local gastromener, his tall, heavily tattooed figure, a striking contrast against the backdrop of the bustling kitchen. His shoulder-length hair, a blend of dirty blonde and light brunette, was either worn down or pulled back into a loose bun, framing a face that belied his age. His rugged leggings and thick-soled boots complemented the casual, open shirt that draped loosely over his muscular frame. Willem's hands moved with a disciplined focus, deftly handling the strangest of ingredients with an empathetic touch that spoke of his deep connection to his craft. Each dish he prepared was not just a meal, it was a testament to his unyielding passion, a blend of culinary skill and a heartfelt desire to nourish and revitalize those who partook in his creations. Observing from a distance was Cien. Her medium brown complexion and athletic build, slightly obscured by the plush folds of her large, hooded jacket. Her keen eyes studied Willem's techniques, her gastronomic curiosity piqued by his illustrious handling of the unusual ingredients. As the crowd around the chef thickened, Cien found her view obstructed. With a subtle shift, she vanished in a puff of black smoke, reappearing beside Oiji, who stood unflinchingly, his gaze scanning the room. Oiji's burnt mahogany skin was set off by his braided locks, with shaved sides, the black hair accented with a shock of purplish red. His simple garb, a plain gray collared shirt, black trousers with many pockets, and simple walking boots, was overshadowed by the vest made of dark black hide, adorned with weird symbols and small animal skulls in place of buttons. His bold, protective nature was evident in his vigilant stance. His intolerance and deceptive skill is masked by a seemingly casual demeanor. Cien, realizing her abrupt entrance, gestured an apology to Oiji and swiftly strafed away, moving through the crowd unnoticed. As Oiji continued his silent vigil, his eyes betraying nothing of his thoughts, the tavern remained a hub of activity, a place where culinary artistry met the diverse tapestry of lives that converged within its walls. Samuel Andrews waited with a gritty patience, his lightly tanned skin, muscular and marked with the stories of past skirmishes, contrasted sharply with his greasy black hair that fell to his shoulders. Clad in leather armor that extended to his knees and a tattered shirt emblazoned with a symbol reminiscent of a prison, perhaps a dark green hue, he was the epitome of a hard-boiled man, one who had seen more than his share of life's harsher side. The shackle strapped to his right wrist, its chain coiled around his hand, was a constant reminder of a past that was never too far behind. As Willem Toth returned to the counter, Samuel inquired about work, his preference clear: the man-hunting kind. Willem, however, disclaimed any knowledge of such opportunities, asserting his role as merely a visitor. Samuel's untrusting nature didn't buy it, but before he could press further, an unexpected opportunity presented itself. The tavern's atmosphere shifted palpably as a sinister figure, unseen for almost a decade, entered with a large entourage of mercenaries known as the Fallen Trees. Tall, eerie, and infamous for their crude but effective methods, they were a sight that commanded attention and fear. The figure, a legendary and polarizing renown artist, slowly scanned the room, his presence causing whispers to ripple through the now hushed crowd. Samuel's eyes narrowed, assessing the situation. The artist and his mercenaries were walking bounties, but engaging them meant risking everything. His stern demeanor masked the rapid calculations of risk and reward taking place in his mind. The tension in the room escalated when Sister Kulia, a figure of bold piety and self-righteous judgment, approached the artist. Her heavy frame, clad in traditional nun's robes and veil, moved with a purpose that belied her size. Her hair was neatly tucked into a bun, a stark contrast to the unruly mercenaries surrounding the artist. As she accused the artist of theft and demanded the return of an item belonging to her temple, one of the mercenaries blocked her path with a limber arm, his threat to slit her throat hanging in the air like a sinister promise. Undeterred, Sister Kalea continued her accusations, only to be met with a brief, smirking glance from the artist before he turned away, beginning to chant a dark sermon. As the artist's dark sermon unfurled its sonic tendrils, a palpable darkness seeped into the very air of the tavern. Oiji, his senses honed for such moments, felt the shift immediately. His ears perked up, alert to the encroaching evil. Among the crowd, another figure reacted, Ovaz, Luminaris of Lantir. Standing with a dignified posture that belied his age, Ovaz surveyed the room with a gaze sharpened by years of selfless service. His robes, a flowing gradient from purest gold at the neck to ivory silk, marked him as a man of high faith and respect. The walls and exits of the room, Oji noticed, were now lined with the twisted forms of the fallen tree mercenaries, their weapons drawn, eyes fixed on the patrons, like predators eyeing prey. The atmosphere thickened with impending violence, a tension that was almost tangible. In this charged environment, Zinhera, a young woman with dusky skin and black hair, moved cautiously towards an exit. Her timidity was evident in her steps, her altruistic nature perhaps driving her to seek help or escape. Clad in dark brown and black traveler's leathers, with a cloak of midnight blue, she was suddenly halted by a mercenary. His cold voice and violent grasp sent shivers down her spine, his intentions clear and menacing. But as he tightened his grip, a crackle of electricity emanated from Zinhera, jolting through the mercenary's nose ring and metal tooth. His hand, raised to strike her, was intercepted by Samuel Andrews. The stern, untrusting man's intervention was swift and decisive, his grip on the mercenary's hand a clear warning. But the tavern's fragile peace shattered as a scream pierced the air. A man, wounded grievously, stumbled across the floor, his hand desperately trying to stem the flow of blood. Chaos erupted as a mercenary brutally attacked another patron, signaling the onset of a savage onslaught. The artist's chants crescendo, fueling the mayhem as the mercenaries unleashed their brutality on the unsuspecting crowd. In the midst of this chaos, Ovaz stood as a beacon of calm amidst the storm, his old man's strength and selfless nature preparing him to act. Zinhera, though shaken, clutched her long dagger, her healer's instincts battling her timidity. Samuel Andrews, his every muscle tensed, assessed the situation, his mind racing to calculate the odds in a room rapidly descending into madness. The tavern, once a place of warmth and camaraderie, had become a battleground, a testament to the darkness that had infiltrated its walls. The gates of the settlement, usually a bustling hub of activity and commerce, had descended into chaos. Ev Stormsore, perched atop a caravan, had been observing the growing tension, his danger sense tingling at the edges of his consciousness. His eyes narrowed as he witnessed a fallen tree mercenary brutally end the life of a weapons merchant with a single savage blow. The scene erupted into pandemonium as nearby rogues and merchants, initially rushing to aid, met similar fates at the hands of the merciless mercenaries. Ash Schultz, amidst the chaos, found herself questioning the very nature of civilization. The brutality unfolding before her eyes was a stark contrast to the ideals she held. The violence was not just an attack on individuals. It was an assault on the concept of safety and order within civilization itself. Came a backdrop to his swift and deadly dance. He weaved through the chaos, his parkour skills allowing him to maneuver with astounding speed and precision. Eve's intervention was a whirlwind of motion, each move saving lives and neutralizing threats with the lethal efficiency of a seasoned warrior. Ash, witnessing Ev's actions, sprang into action herself. Her training with the polearm was evident in her fluid, deadly strikes. She moved with a purpose, her naginata, a blur of steel and wood. As she drove her weapon through the neck of a mercenary, threatening a group of cornered civilians, her electricity manipulation came into play, crisping the mercenary enough for her to retrieve her blade with ease. The brief nod exchanged between Eve and Ash was a silent acknowledgement of their shared purpose in this maelstrom of violence. As Eve disappeared into another pocket of chaos, Ash looked skyward, sensing a change in the wind and a magnetic shift. The air itself seemed charged with a foreboding energy, hinting at greater forces at play beyond the immediate turmoil. The evening at the bakery had been winding down in its usual, comforting routine when the outside world violently intruded. Darren, the ex-general turned baker, had just extended a gesture of kindness to a stranger, offering him the last warm loaf of bread of the day. The stranger's attempt to pay was gently refused by Darren, who declared the bakery closed. It was a simple, human moment that stood in stark contrast to what was about to unfold. As Darren and Skinny prepared to leave, the tranquility of the evening was shattered by the sudden influx of bloodied, panicked civilians fleeing from the gates. The stark terror in their eyes spoke volumes of the horror unfolding just a short distance away. Among them, an elderly woman, her life ebbing away from a throwing knife lodged in her neck, reached out to Darren, her plea for help silenced forever by the cruel hand of death. Darren's gaze shifted from the dying woman to the chaos at the gate, then to Skinny. In that moment, the baker's apron was shed, revealing the warrior beneath. He broke open the chest behind the great stove, revealing his old dented armor, shield, and axe, relics of a past life he thought he had left behind. Each notch on the axe told a story, a memory of battles long past. Skinny, his demeanor changing from philosophical contemplation to focused determination, whispered a silent prayer. His hand found its way to the handle of his gigantic 10-pound axe, a weapon that seemed an extension of his own resolve. Together, with a shared intensity born of duty and courage, they sprinted towards the settlement gate, ready to protect and defend those in peril. The stranger, left behind in the wake of their departure, sensed a deeper turmoil at play. His curiosity piqued. He began to walk towards the source of the disturbance, drawn by an inexplicable feeling that what was happening at the gates was more than just a random outbreak of violence. It was as if the very fabric of the settlement was being tested, and he felt an undeniable pull to witness, or perhaps even partake in, the unfolding drama. In the heart of the tavern, a sinister tableau unfolded with the artist at its center. His guttural enchantment resonated through the air, a dark incantation that seemed to draw power from the very earth beneath him. The glowing square upon which he stood anchored him amidst a maelstrom of his own making, as objects within a 5-foot radius began to defy gravity, levitating ominously around him. Sister Kulia, her resolve unshaken, attempted to breach the line of mercenaries. Her efforts were met with a violent response as one of the mercenaries lashed out, his fists crashing against her face. But the impact was not as he intended. Instead of yielding flesh, his hands met an unyielding surface as her skin transformed into stone, his hands crashing upon her head like waves on coastal rocks, nearly disintegrating every bone in his hands. She stood unscathed, a testament to her formidable arcane knowledge. With a swift expulsion of katabatic winds by the flick of her wrist, she sent the artist's bodyguards hurtling through the air, their bodies crashing into distant tables. The artist, his ritual disturbed, responded with a deeper delve into darkness. From the ground around him rose 4 sinister machinations, each exuding a thick, black miasma that began to creep across the floor like a living, malevolent entity. This miasma, dense with dark energy, threatened to engulf the tavern in its shadowy embrace. Oijiras, witnessing the escalating threat, momentarily stepped back from the chaos. His ears, finely tuned to the nuances of dark magic, sought to decipher the artist's chants. Pressing his fingers together, Oiji delved into his extensive knowledge of the dark arts, seeking a clue, a key to unraveling the artist's intent. However, his concentration was shattered as the creeping miasma nearly ensnared his foot, forcing him to reposition and abandon his analytical pursuit. In a swift response, Oiji summoned a magic immunity wall around himself, a shimmering barrier that repelled the physical manifestation of the dark magic. The artist, sensing Oiji's resistance, intensified his focus, directing the bulk of the miasma towards the protected figure. Oiji, maintaining his magical wall, retreated strategically, circling the artist and his dark ritual. In the shadowed recesses near the back door of the tavern, 2 mercenaries stood guard, their conversation a low murmur in the night. They spoke with a mix of awe and uncertainty about the sorcerer's magic, the ritual unfolding within, and the grim directive that hung over them like a dark shroud. Everyone inside must perish, no matter the cost. Their grim dialogue was abruptly interrupted by a fellow mercenary, panic etched on his face, bursting from the tavern and calling for reinforcements. As the 2 guards moved to respond, their readiness was met with swift and brutal treachery. The first mercenary barely had time to register surprise before his neck was snapped with a chilling efficiency. His companion, just beginning to react, met a similarly swift end, her throat slit before she could utter a sound. The perpetrator of this sudden betrayal, another mercenary, scanned the area cautiously. Assured of his solitude, he signaled subtly. From the shadows emerged a sow, her presence almost ethereal. She approached the treacherous mercenary, her mask removed to reveal a face of such captivating beauty that it seemed to transcend the ordinary. Her suggestion to him was laced with a persuasive charm that was as supernatural as it was irresistible. She spoke of a future, of a life beyond the bloodshed and contracts, a life where they could be together. Her words, imbued with an otherworldly allure, ensnared the mercenary's heart. He gazed at her, lost in a spell of infatuation, and promised to meet her at the gates by midnight, after fulfilling his last contract. The power of Asao's charm was evident in his unwavering commitment, a testament to her ability to bend wills and shape desires. As the mercenary turned back to the fray, Asao slipped away into the night. In the midst of the tavern's chaos, Samuel Andrews stood as a bulwark between the frenzied mercenaries and Zinhera. His combat prowess was evident as he grappled with the assailants, his training in the art of subduing opponents shining through. With a swift move, he ensnared one mercenary's knife and wrist within his chains, pulling them into a compromising position. Yet the mercenary's bizarre limberness allowed them to escape, slithering onto a table with unsettling agility. Another mercenary, armed with spinning daggers, launched into a ferocious assault. Samuel, undaunted, beckoned them forward, drawing their focus and sparing Zinhera from their wrath. As throwing knives whizzed toward him, he used his chains to deflect them, his knot-tying skills evident in the way he manipulated the chain with precision. Unfurling the chain, he lashed out at the approaching mercenaries, who contorted their bodies in unnatural ways to evade his strikes. In a corner, unnoticed amidst the pandemonium, Xian sat with her focus locked on the artist. Her magically amplified hearing dissected each syllable of his chant, discerning a proclamation of the Master Plane's absolute restoration. As the chant continued, she observed the miasma's insidious spread, claiming the lives of those seeking refuge. The dark energy fed the maelstrom before the artist, growing in intensity and malevolence. Sister Kulia, combating the miasma with her katabatic winds, found herself overwhelmed as the miasma began to taint and overpower her winds. In a critical moment, Oiji Ras intervened, encasing her in a protective arcane wall that neutralized the miasma's deadly essence. Pointing out an escape route to Sister Kulia, Oiji provided her a chance to retreat from the immediate danger. As the miasma corroded his wall, Oiji, with a swift series of gestures, conjured an energy javelin. His frustration and urgency were palpable as he hurled the javelin towards the artist, only for it to hang suspended in the air, caught in the ritual's levitation field. Realizing the futility of his attack, Oiji was forced to fall back, retreating from the miasma that now flooded the tavern's ground floor. The gates of the settlement had transformed into a battleground, a maelstrom of chaos and violence. Ev Stormsore, driven by a deep sense of duty, leaped into action, aiding civilians caught in the crossfire. The fallen trees, their hostility escalating, became increasingly effective at repelling the innocent, their actions fueling the fire in Ev's heart. Amidst the turmoil, a civilian was brutally thrown to the ground beside Ev. As he grappled with an enemy, a mercenary aimed a handbow at the civilian. In a flash, Darren Longswift intervened, his worn steel shield deflecting the acid-laced bolt. With a powerful swing of his axe, Darren nearly severed the attacker's hand, his subsequent kick sending the assailant sprawling into his comrades. The mercenaries swarmed Darren, their attacks agile and relentless. Yet Darren's skill with axe and shield shone through, his strikes precise and deadly, his shield ever ready to thwart the agile foes. At his side, Skinny wielded his massive axe with surprising dexterity, creating a protective barrier for fleeing civilians. Despite a crossbow bolt piercing his chest, Skinny's divine aura shielded him from the worst, his faith unshaken. Darren's timely intervention deflected another bolt aimed at Skinny's head, his words a reminder of Skinny's purpose. However, the fallen trees were not to be underestimated. Natural killers, their relentless assault made escape a perilous endeavor. The civilians, trapped between the onslaught of the gates and an encroaching darkness, were paralyzed with fear. This darkness, an endless wall of obscurity, advanced towards the settlement. As it drew nearer, the world around them seemed to fall into a hushed silence. The civilians, caught in a dilemma of unimaginable horror, were unsure whether to flee the violence at the gates or face the unknown terror of the approaching darkness. The scene at the settlement gates was one of chaos and bloodshed, a grim testament to the brutality of the fallen trees. Amidst the carnage, a figure emerged, walking with a confidence that seemed to part the very air around him. Nazareth Lord, a towering presence at 7 feet tall, adorned in an exotic robe that partially exposed his chest, marked with a numeric symbol, 12, etched into his flesh. The ancient jewels and stacks of gold necklaces he wore bounced with each step, adding to his imposing aura. As he approached the gates, the mercenaries, busy celebrating their bloody victory, turned their attention to this new, formidable figure. Behind Nazareth, several battered and wounded civilians, armed with weapons scavenged from the fallen, seemed ready to follow him into hell itself. One of the mercenaries, trying to maintain some semblance of control, shouted at Nazareth, "The darkness is not what you should be worried about, fella. You'll fare better if you just walk the other way." But Nazareth was undeterred by the warning or the impending doom of the encroaching darkness. With a monumental posture, Nazareth extended his open palms and proclaimed with a voice that resonated with power, "Your God King stands before you, and you will kneel." His words, imbued with an almost supernatural force, captivated the mercenaries. One by one, their knees began to waver, as if his very presence commanded their subservience. It was unclear whether it was fear, respect, or a strange mix of both. But the superiority that Nazareth exuded was undeniable. Most of the mercenaries found themselves involuntarily bending the knee, as if there was no other conceivable action in the presence of such a figure. However, one among them, a mercenary of high rank and their acting leader, stood defiant. He looked around at his kneeling peers with disgust and tried to command them to stand, but his words fell on deaf ears. Nazareth watched this display with a smirk, assessing the worthiness of his adversary. The mercenary captain, nearly as tall as Nazareth, stepped forward with a devilish smile of his own. "You made a mistake. Allow me to show you why," he whispered, his voice a mix of challenge and anticipation. The standoff between Nazareth and the mercenary captain was more than a mere confrontation. It was a symbolic struggle for dominance. A moment that would define the course of the battle, and perhaps the fate of the settlement itself. The captain's scimitar, a blade that had ended many lives, arced through the air towards Nazareth's throat. But upon impact, it shattered, as if it had struck an unyielding wall of adamantite. The captain's eyes widened in disbelief, his weapon reduced to fragments, leaving only a superficial mark on Nazareth's skin. In that moment of shock, Nazareth's expression transformed into a predatory smile. With a swift, brutal grace, he seized the captain's head with one hand and the broken sword with the other. In a display of terrifying strength, he forced the blade through the captain's chest, impaling him upon his own weapon. The captain's body was torn asunder in a gruesome spectacle, his halves falling to the ground with a sickening thud. This act of raw power sent a shockwave through the ranks of the mercenaries and the civilians alike. Nazareth turned to the civilians, his voice thundering a command to attack. Galvanized by his display of dominance, the civilians surged forward in a frenzied assault, their fear transformed into a berserker's rage. The battlefield became a whirlwind of violence and chaos, with Nazareth at its eye. His laughter rang out, a sound both exhilarating and terrifying, as he reveled in the carnage unfolding around him. The mercenaries, now leaderless and demoralized, found themselves overwhelmed by the sheer ferocity of the civilians, who fought not just for survival, but for the glory of their newfound god-king. The battlefield at the gates had transformed into a tableau of primal ferocity and unbridled chaos. The civilians, outnumbering the mercenaries 3-1, fought with a desperate, almost animalistic tenacity. Their actions were not those of trained soldiers, but of people driven by raw emotion and the will to survive, spurred on by the awe-inspiring presence of Nazareth. Amidst the clashing of steel and cries of the fallen, scenes of brutal struggle unfolded. A fisherman, his face etched with determination, was suddenly decapitated by a mercenary's swift strike. But retribution was immediate and merciless. 3 civilians, fueled by rage and grief, converged on the mercenary. Spears, crude but deadly, pierced the mercenary's armor from all sides, pinning him in a lethal embrace. As he fell, a civilian, face contorted with fury, thrust a burning torch against him, setting his body ablaze in a grim spectacle of vengeance. Elsewhere, a mercenary had overpowered a woman, his hands clasped tightly around her throat. But even in the clutches of death, she fought back with a ferocious resolve. Her hands, trembling with adrenaline, found his face, stabbing relentlessly. Her fingers, slick with blood, gouged at his eyes, her screams mingling with his howls of pain. It was a dance of death, both brutal and intimate, a testament to the raw, unyielding spirit of those fighting for their lives. Nazareth, amidst this carnage, moved like a specter of war. His presence alone was enough to sway the tide of battle. He watched, almost serenely, as the skirmish raged around him. To him, this was more than a battle. It was an affirmation of his power, a vivid display of the primal forces he could unleash. His laughter, dark and resonant, echoed over the battlefield, a sound that inspired terror and admiration in equal measure. The civilians, emboldened by their god-king's presence, fought with a fervor that belied their lack of training. Each blow they struck, each life they claimed, was a tribute to the man who had given them a cause to fight for, a figure who had transformed their fear into a weapon more potent than any sword or spear. In this brutal symphony of violence, Nazareth stood as the conductor, his will shaping the fate of all who fought under the shadow of the gates. In the midst of the tumultuous battlefield, a man, overwhelmed by fear and desperation, abandoned his children beneath a pile of bodies, seeking to escape the carnage. His cowardice, however, did not go unnoticed. Nazareth, with a predator's instinct, seized him by the nape of his neck. With a contemptuous snarl, Nazareth hurled the man into the heart of the battle, bellowing, "Fight for your honor, you shit!" The man thrown into the fray met a grisly end, an arm severed in the melee, his body trampled underfoot by the frenzied combatants. Another civilian, panic-stricken, attempted to flee the scene. Nazareth's eyes locked onto the fleeing figure, but the chaos of battle momentarily obscured his prey. When he finally spotted the man cornered and trembling by the gate, Nazareth advanced with a menacing gait, intent on thrusting him back into the fray. But before he could lay his hands on the man, Darren Loneswift intervened, positioning himself protectively between Nazareth and the civilian. His axe, a symbol of defiance, was poised and ready. "That's enough," Darren growled, his voice a low rumble of barely contained fury. In that moment of confrontation, the civilian began to chant arcane incantations, his form shimmering and contorting. Before the eyes of the astonished onlookers, he transformed into a colossally glorious, golden-scaled reptilian behemoth, its majestic form drowning out the blood-soaked battlefield. With a powerful leap and a beat of its enormous wings, the entity ascended, leaving a gust of wind in its wake that sent bystanders tumbling. Darren, momentarily transfixed by the awe-inspiring sight, was jolted back to reality by Nazareth's mocking laughter. "What are you doing?" Darren barked, his attention snapping back to the looming threat of Nazareth. With a sardonic grin, Nazareth raised his hand, his fingers curling into a fist. "Embracing this glorious battle," he declared cryptically. As his fist clenched, a massive dome of dark blue energy, crackling with black electricity, began to form around them. The barrier enclosed the battlefield, sealing the combatants within an impenetrable magical arena. Realizing the futility of confronting Nazareth directly at that moment, Darren shifted his focus to aiding his allies, Ev Stormsore and Skinny, who were deeply engaged in combat with the formidable fallen trees. The battlefield, now a closed arena under Nazareth's control, became a crucible of conflict. Nazareth, reveling in the chaos, opened his arms wide, an invitation to the mercenaries surrounding him. His laughter echoed through the dome, a chilling soundtrack to the unfolding slaughter. The mercenaries, driven by a mix of fear and determination, converged on him, only to be met with the brutal might of a man who found joy in the heart of battle. In the thick of the miasma, Samuel Andrews found himself desperately outnumbered, his back against the encroaching fog, mercenaries closing in. Nearby, Zinhera faced her own peril, cornered by a mercenary whose impish demeanor belied a sinister intent. As he juggled knives, taunting her with a macabre choice, Zinhera's resolve wavered, her sigh not of boredom, but of resignation to a darker power within. Summoning Ayanga, Zinhera's form crackled with electric fury, her hair streaked with white, her veins pulsing with blue energy. The mercenary, mistaking her transformation for fear, lunged forward only to be met with a searing bolt of lightning from Zinhera's outstretched finger. The charged power struck him and those behind, their weapons frozen in spasmodic grips. Ayanga, in control now, blasted through a window, her exit resonating with a sonic boom that snapped Cien back from his distraction. Inside, the room grew darker, the air thick with blood mist and black miasma. Amidst this chaos, a beacon of light emerged. Ovas Luminaris of Lantir, radiating a powerful positive aura, stood as a bastion of hope. Oyija and Sister Kulea, rallying civilians towards this sanctuary of light, fought valiantly to keep the encroaching darkness at bay. Samuel, drawn to this light, stumbled towards Ovaz, who extended a hand, pulling him to his feet. Revitalized, Samuel rejoined the fray, determined to protect the civilians from the sinister forces at play. Ovaz, channeling the divine wisdom of Lantir, summoned a great sphere of light, the Shield of Dawn, repelling the barrage of projectiles and holding the miasma at bay. The mercenaries, undeterred, launched wave after wave of attacks. Samuel, with chains in hand, caught a mercenary mid-leap, slamming him to the ground. The struggle was fierce, but Samuel prevailed, casting the mercenary into the miasma, narrowly avoiding its corrosive touch himself, thanks to Willem Toth, keeping him from falling forward. With his stirring paddle, a weapon of unexpected proficiency, he dispatched an assailant with a brutal efficiency, his ferryman's defensive style evident in each calculated strike. Willem leads the group to the bar counter and with few words hands Samuel a knapsack filled with protective satchels and gives him precise instructions towards safety and tells him to locate the marks. With no time for questions, Samuel, burdened with the responsibility for the lives of dozens, descended into the cellar, following Willem's cryptic directions. The battlefield outside Nazareth's Colosseum was a maelstrom of violence and chaos, with Ahlai at its epicenter. Mounted on her warhorse, she was a formidable sight, her presence alone commanding and fierce. As she surveyed the unfolding massacre and the encroaching darkness, her mind was a whirlwind of strategy and determination. The large blue dome that thwarted her initial plans only served to fuel her resolve. With a cold, commanding tone that cut through the clamor of battle, Alai issued her orders, her voice resonating with authority. We act as their saviors. Their lives will be our currency. The enforcers, you overwhelm them. Leave the leader to me. Her words were met with an immediate response. The remnants of her warband, loyal and unflinching, mounted up, ready to follow her into the heart of the fray. As they charged, Ahlai led the charge, a terror upon horseback. Her movements were precise and deadly, her axe a blur of destruction. She carved a path straight toward the gates, her foes falling one after another. An agile mercenary made the fatal mistake of leaping onto her horse, attempting to engage her in close combat. With a swift, brutal motion, Alai swung her axe, severing the mercenary's legs and tossing him aside like a rag doll. But the battle was relentless. Another adversary managed to latch onto her, stabbing at her back. Unfazed, Alai responded with a devastating elbow strike, her resilience and ferocity on full display. In a fluid motion, she executed a sharp U-turn, aligning herself with an oncoming ally from her warband. The ally, understanding her intent, dashed past on horseback, severing the hapless mercenary in half. Holding up the severed legs in one hand and her axe in the other, Alai bellowed a command that resonated across the battlefield. "Fell all of the trees!" Her voice, imbued with the power of a leader born and bred in war, unleashed a roaring war cry. It was a sound that stirred the hearts of her warband, amplifying their ferocity and determination. They ramped up their efforts, laying waste to the remaining mercenaries outside the Colosseum with renewed vigor. Through the translucent dome of Nazareth's Colosseum, Alai glimpsed the brutal ballet of death within. Nazareth, his eyes glowing purple, wielded his sword with a lethal grace, each strike a testament to his formidable prowess. Beside him, Ash Schultz fought with a precision and ferocity that was almost artistic, her naginata an extension of her will. As the darkness enveloped the area, reaching the very gates themselves, a hush fell over the battlefield. Alai, ever the tactician, sensed the change in the air. The unknown magic of the darkness was a new variable, one that could bring unforeseen dangers. She commanded her warband to brace for anything, her voice carrying the weight of experience and the unspoken promise of survival through unity and strength. The battlefield was a maelstrom of horror and chaos, a scene straight out of a nightmare. Amidst the clashing of steel and the cries of the dying, a warrior, tense and alert, gripped his axe with white-knuckled intensity. His horse, sensing the terror in the air, shifted uneasily beneath him, its eyes wide with fear. Suddenly, Alai's voice, sharp and urgent, cut through the din. "Turn around!" she screamed. The warrior spun his mount, axe poised for battle, but saw nothing but the swirling mists of darkness. Confused, he turned back, only to be met with a sight that chilled his blood. Before him hovered a grotesque, winged entity, its body a twisted mockery of nature. It had a long, bladed tail and hands that ended in razor-sharp talons. Its face was a thing of nightmares, and from its throat came a hostile shriek that mimicked Alai's commanding tone. In a blur of movement, the creature struck. Its tail, swift and deadly, impaled the warrior, piercing through his armor as if it were made of cloth. Then with a horrific tearing sound, the tail ripped across his midsection, spilling his entrails in a gruesome display. With a powerful beat of its wings, the creature lifted off, carrying the lifeless body of the warrior into the dark sky. The horse, panicked and in pain, reared up, but its fate was sealed. Another of the nightmarish creatures swooped down from the darkness above. With a precision born of malice, it gutted the horse in mid-air, its talons slicing through flesh and bone. The horse's screams were cut short as the creature snatched it up, disappearing into the enveloping darkness with its prize. Alai's senses were on high alert, her warrior instincts finely tuned to the cacophony of battle around her. The air was thick with the stench of blood and fear, punctuated by the eerie mimicry of her own voice, calling out in desperation. It was a disconcerting chorus, the flyer liars using her voice to sow confusion and terror among her ranks. The sounds of her men and horses being mercilessly slaughtered and snatched into the air filled the night, a haunting symphony of death. "Help!" The cry came from behind her, a twisted echo of her own voice. Alai, unfooled by the ruse, spun her horse around with practiced ease. Her eyes narrowed as she faced the manifestation, a grotesque parody of life with its twisted form and malevolent intent. With a swift, decisive movement, she reached out and grasped the creature by its neck. Her grip was iron, her strength formidable. With a quick twist, she snapped its neck, effectively paralyzing the abomination. Without a moment's hesitation, she hurled the limp body to the ground and mercilessly trampled it under her horse's hooves, a clear message to the other creatures lurking in the shadows. As she surveyed the battlefield, her gaze lifted to the sky, where several ominous silhouettes circled like vultures over her beleaguered warband. The mist, obscured their full horror. But their intent was unmistakably malevolent. Without warning, a new terror struck. From beneath her horse, something monstrous burrowed upwards, its claws tearing into the flesh of the animal. The horse buckled under the vicious assault, its agonized screams piercing the night. Give me, grr, take. The voice was fiendish, a guttural growl emanating from the darkness below. It was a take and a wanter, its many eyes gleaming with greed and malice. Arlai reacted instantly, rolling away as her horse was violently pulled into the ground by the relentless creature. She landed deftly on her feet, her warrior's poise unshaken despite the chaos unfolding around her. The battlefield was a living nightmare, but Arlai was no stranger to the horrors of war. She stood ready, her resolve unbroken, prepared to face whatever the darkness threw at her next. The chaos outside the Colosseum was a maelstrom of horror and violence. As Nazareth, with a twisted smile, dissipated the magical dome, the reality of the situation became starkly apparent to everyone. The darkness was not just encroaching, it was alive, hungry, and malevolent. Darren and Skinny exchanged a look of grim determination. They knew what had to be done. As Nazareth commanded the survivors to fight alongside him, the air was filled with the sounds of battle and terror. The flyer liars, with their silent wings and deadly talons, swooped down from the darkness, their attacks swift and brutal. Civilians, caught in the midst of this nightmare, tried to fend off the creatures but were brutally overpowered. Skinny, his heart heavy with the burden of the wounded and dying, rushed to a civilian lying on the ground, grievously injured. As he prayed, the divine light began to work its magic, the gaping wound starting to close. But the respite was short-lived. From the shadows, a taken wanter emerged, its many-eyed, shelled body a grotesque sight. It grabbed the civilian's legs, its mandibles and blades whirring as it began to pull its victim into itself. Come here, grr, come here. It beckoned, its voice a sinister growl. Skinny, in a desperate attempt to save the civilian, struck at the creature with his axe, but it was like hitting stone. The creature's carapace was impervious to his attacks. Just then, 3 more of the monstrous entities emerged from the darkness, encircling Skinny. The situation seemed dire until Darren Loneswift arrived, his axe ablaze with magical fire. He swung it fiercely, the flames keeping the nightmarish creatures at bay. Meanwhile, Ash Schultz, with the grace and precision of a seasoned warrior, flanked the creatures. She thrust her polearm through their shells, her strength and skill finding the weak spots in their armor. With each successful strike, she unleashed jolts of electricity, frying the insides of the creatures. The air crackled with the energy of her attacks, lighting up the dark battlefield with flashes of electric blue. In the midst of the chaos, Nazareth stood as a colossus of battle, his laughter echoing through the darkness, a sound both terrifying and exhilarating. His shadow, cast long and ominous by the flickering light of the surrounding carnage, was a beacon of indomitable strength. As Darren, Skinny, and Ash Schultz made the strategic decision to retreat into the relative safety of the settlement, they witnessed Nazareth's formidable prowess. A taken Pawanter, its grotesque form a nightmare made flesh, latched onto Nazareth's arm, its mandibles, designed to crush and rend, met the unyielding resistance of Nazareth's juggernaut scales. With a look of disdain, Nazareth delivered a devastating punch straight into the creature's core. The impact was cataclysmic, shattering the creature's body and carapace into a shower of grotesque fragments. Before he could savor his victory, a flyer-liar, a creature of silent death, swooped down from the darkness, its razor-sharp tail coiled around Nazareth's neck, a deadly noose intent on ending the God King's reign. But Nazareth, undeterred and unyielding, responded with a swift and brutal swing of his greatsword. The blade cut through the manifestation with lethal precision, severing it effortlessly. His strength was unmatched, his resolve unbreakable. With each fallen foe, Nazareth's fervor grew. He dispatched several more of the nightmarish entities, his greatsword a blur of death. Then, with a roar that resonated with jubilant defiance, he rallied the remaining fighters. His voice, booming and powerful, cut through the despair, igniting a spark of hope and determination in the hearts of those still standing. Lazuli Melret, her path illuminated by the flickering blue flame in her hand, navigated the treacherous landscape littered with the fallen. The battlefield was a grim tableau of the day's horrors, with the bodies of mercenaries, civilians, and allies' warriors strewn haphazardly. Her steps, light yet determined, carried her towards a less ravaged clearing, a potential gateway to the relative safety of the settlement. As she approached the passage, a mercenary, battered and on the brink of death, emerged, clawing desperately towards safety. Lazuli, showing a moment of mercy, spared him and hastened her pace. However, the mercenary, driven by survival or malice, lunged at her, grabbing her ankle in a last-ditch effort to drag her down. Reacting swiftly, Lazuli conjured a ball of blue flame, her signature fire manipulation at work. With a swift motion, she unleashed the fiery orb point blank, obliterating the assailant in a burst of heat and light, leaving nothing but a charred, unrecognizable heap. Her attention was quickly drawn to several humanoid figures in the distance. At first glance, they bore resemblance to the toxin merchants encountered earlier, but a sinister aura surrounded them. As Lazuli cautiously prepared to investigate, one of the figures stepped forward, revealing its true nightmarish form. Covered in mangled, matted fur and carrying a steaming knapsack filled with glowing, ominous contents, it was a manifestation of darkness and malice. Without hesitation, the creature reached into its knapsack and hurled a sizzling, crackling orb towards Lazuli. Demonstrating her wind's blessing, she leaped high into the air, the wind doubling her jump, narrowly evading the explosive impact. The orb detonated upon contact with the ground, its corrosive contents melting the remains of the fallen mercenary. Realizing the peril she faced, Lazuli made the prudent decision to retreat into the settlement. As she disappeared into the relative safety of the gates, another figure emerged from the enveloping darkness. Father Edmund, a master of shadow manipulation, moved with eerie silence, blending seamlessly with the shadows. His presence was almost ghostly, a specter passing through the chaos unnoticed. With a practiced ease, he slipped through the gates, disappearing once more into the shadows, his motives and intentions as enigmatic as the darkness he wielded. The cellar, once a simple storage for provisions, had transformed into a labyrinthine escape route under the dire circumstances. Ovaz and Sam, leading the group, arrived at what appeared to be a dead-end pantry, filled with the earthy aroma of vegetables and spices. The urgency in Sam's voice, as he recalled Willem's cryptic instruction to find the marks, resonated through the cramped space. Ovaz, tapping into the divine wisdom of Lantir, summoned the Lantern of Revelation. The mystical lantern, infused with celestial knowledge, cast a revealing light over the walls, unveiling previously hidden etchings. These marks, left by Willem, were like a secret language, guiding them to a concealed exit. Sam, with a sense of newfound hope, located and pulled the latch, revealing a hidden passage leading to safety. Meanwhile, at the bottleneck of the cellar entrance, Sister Kalia and Oijai stood guard. As mercenaries attempted to breach their last line of defense, Sister Kalia unleashed her blizzardous blades. A volley of ice spikes flew with deadly precision, clipping and impaling the assailants. The mercenaries, caught off guard by the sudden icy assault, hesitated in their pursuit, giving the group precious time. As Willem made his final dash down the corridor, mercenaries hot on his heels, Sister Kulia invoked the mountain's wrath. The earth responded to her call, and stone spikes erupted from the ground, impaling the assailants in a gruesome display of her earth-bending prowess. The corridor behind them turned into a gauntlet of stone and ice, a testament to Sister Kulia's mastery over her elemental powers. With Willem safely through, Sister Kulia, with a decisive clap of her hands, brought down the corridor, crushing the remaining mercenaries under tons of rock and debris. The finality of the collapsing passage echoed through the cellar, a grim reminder of the cost of their escape. Catching his breath, Willem reached into his satchel, retrieving something chewy that seemed to invigorate him. His promise of a warm meal and a hot fire after the ordeal brought a momentary sense of comfort amidst the chaos. Cien, emerging unexpectedly from behind Willem, startled them both. Offering to assist in cooking, Cien's presence was a welcome addition, and Willem, grateful for the help, agreed enthusiastically. Samuel Andrews, his resolve hardened, led the civilians onward. They were safe for now, but the events of the day weighed heavily on him. There needed to be consequences for the horrors unleashed, and Samuel knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. But for now, the immediate danger had passed, and the survivors could take a brief respite in their newfound safety. In the shadowy aftermath of the battle, Achlai and her warband stood defiant, surrounded by the fallen forms of their vanquished foes. The ground was a grim mosaic of defeated manifestations, evidence of their fierce combat prowess. Achlai, her figure dominant on the battlefield, hoisted her blood-stained axe into the air. The weapon, a symbol of her strength and leadership, gleamed faintly in the weak light. Her voice, clear and authoritative, cut through the silence. "Follow me inside." Her words galvanized her warband, a group tempered by the fires of battle, and united in their shared ordeal. With determined strides, they advanced towards the gates. Each warrior, though fatigued from the relentless fighting, was driven by a deep sense of duty and the unspoken camaraderie born from shared adversity. In contrast, Nazareth remained amidst the darkness, his interest piqued by the unknown. The chaos of the battle had kindled a deep curiosity within him, a yearning to confront whatever mysteries the shadows might hold. Standing alone among the remnants of conflict, he was an imposing figure, seemingly at ease in the ominous stillness that surrounded him. The air was thick with expectation, hinting that the immediate battle was over, but the larger conflict still loomed. Nazareth's gaze pierced through the gloom, a mix of keen interest and readiness for combat, evident in his demeanor, eagerly awaiting the next encounter that the darkness might unveil. The aftermath of the artist's ritual painted a grim picture at the remnants of the tavern. The miasma, a sinister and corrosive force, had taken its toll, leaving behind a landscape of devastation. Bodies, both of mercenaries and civilians, lay strewn across the area, a silent testament to the ritual's deadly efficacy. In the midst of this desolation stood the artist, a figure of exhaustion, yet tinged with a sense of unhinged triumph. His ritual, dark and catastrophic, had unfolded according to his design. Around him, the few who remained were his guards, still loyal due to their mercenary bond. Darren, Loneswift, and Skinny, standing amidst the corroded ruins, took in the scene with a mix of horror and disbelief. The miasma had receded, but its legacy was etched in the destruction that surrounded them. Evu Stormsore, his gaze sweeping across the aftermath, searched desperately for any sign of his ally. The sight of countless fallen victims of the miasma's unforgiving nature weighed heavily on him. The tragedy that had unfolded here was a stark reminder of the dangers they faced in this chaotic world. The artist, central to this chaos, seemed to teeter on the edge of sanity. His ritual, while successful, had drained him, leaving him in a state of physical and mental exhaustion. Yet there was a glint in his eye, a spark of madness perhaps, born from the knowledge of what he had unleashed. The two mercenaries guarding him stood vigilant, their loyalty bought and paid for. In a world where allegiance often shifted like the wind, their continued service to the artist was a rare constant, albeit one fueled by coin rather than conviction. As the survivors of this ordeal took stock of their situation, the air was heavy with the unspoken question of what would come next. The artist's ritual had changed the landscape of their struggle, and now they had to navigate this new, more perilous path that lay before them. The artist, a figure of malevolent power, had just begun to boast of his deeds when Alai's thunderous approach cut him short. Her presence, commanding and fierce, shifted the focus of the battlefield. As Alai marched towards the artist, her determination was palpable. The mercenaries, initially focused on her, soon realized the gravity of their situation. One, in a desperate attempt, lunged at Alai, stabbing her thigh. Unfazed, Alai retaliated with brutal efficiency, severing his hand. To the shock of all, the hand regrew, a grotesque display of some dark magic at work, and the battle between them intensified. Meanwhile, the artist, seeking to escape the confrontation, levitated off the ground, his hands weaving arcane symbols. His attempt at evasion, however, was thwarted by Samuel Andrews, who emerged with a sense of unyielding duty. Samuel's intervention, a dense metal chain binding the artist, was a momentary setback for the mage. The artist's guard, ever vigilant, severed the chain, freeing him and engaging Samuel in a fierce melee. Samuel, with his characteristic resilience, managed to subdue the mercenary with a devastating combination of martial prowess and tactical acumen. In the midst of this, the artist, ever the trickster, shrank to the size of a coin, slipping from his bonds, only to reappear in full form. He unleashed a barrage of spells, each one a testament to his dark power. Darren Loneswift, caught off guard, narrowly deflected a miniature comet, the explosion hurling him backward. Eva Stormsore, determined to confront the artist, found himself face to face with an unexpected adversary, a clone of himself, born from the shadows. The clone's tackle sent him sprawling to the ground, a mirror image of his own strength and skill. The chaos escalated as Alai's warband faced a surreal and terrifying situation. Their own horses, driven into a berserk rage by some unseen force, turned against them. The loyal steeds, now instruments of destruction, inflicted harm upon themselves in their frenzy to attack their riders. The scene was one of unbridled chaos, a clash of wills and powers where every moment was a struggle for survival. The artist's machinations had turned the battlefield into a nightmarish tableau, with each combatant pushed to their limits against foes, both familiar and bizarre. The artist cracks open another book and begins casting from it when suddenly, like a psychic flashbang, the pages explode, momentarily scrambling his mind. Oiji, focusing intently on sustaining the disruptive magic field, afflicting the artist. The effect was immediate and disorienting, especially for the artist, who was caught directly in the blast. Pages from his book, once imbued with dark incantations, were sent flying in a whirlwind of confusion, their magic disrupted. The artist, his mind crippled by the psychic assault, staggered, trying to regain his senses. This moment of vulnerability was a stark contrast to the control and menace he had exuded moments before. His eyes, wide with panic, darted around as he struggled to comprehend the sudden turn of events. Ev Stormsore, momentarily ensnared in an illusion, found himself suddenly freed as the illusion dissipated under the influence of Oiji's psychic burst. He stumbled, disoriented, but quickly regained his footing with Oiji's assistance. The two shared a brief note of understanding. There was no time for words as the battle was still unfolding. The warband's horses, previously maddened by some unseen force, calmed as the disruptive energy cleared their minds. The riders, now back in control, quickly regrouped, ready to follow Alai's lead. Alai, in the midst of the turmoil, had not missed a beat. She dealt with the mercenary with ruthless efficiency, her axe a blur of motion. The final blow was both brutal and decisive, leaving no doubt about her prowess as a warrior. Turning her attention to the artist, Alai grasped him by his unkempt hair, yanking his head back to expose his neck. The crowd of survivors, their faces a tapestry of emotions, watched intently as Alai raised her axe for the final blow. The artist, his eyes filled with fear, seemed to shrink under her grip. The axe, raised high, caught the light as Alai prepared to deliver the final blow. The air was heavy with anticipation, the crowd silent, the moment frozen in time. Alai's arm tensed, ready to swing, the axe poised to end the artist's reign of terror and bring closure to the chaos he had wrought. The atmosphere was charged with a volatile mix of tension and anticipation. Darren Loneswift, his voice resonant with the authority of a seasoned military leader, sought to pierce through Alai's relentless resolve. His eyes locked with hers. "Do you think killing him does anything to fix this?" he asked, his gesture encompassing the widespread destruction and the dark, foreboding abyss that loomed ominously outside. Samuel Andrews stood firmly beside Darren, echoing the sentiment that the artist must be brought to justice for the atrocities he had committed. Alai, momentarily caught in the grip of Darren's compelling gaze, hesitated. The zone of truth sought to unravel her thoughts, compelling honesty in a moment that demanded introspection. "Of course, killing him fixes all of this," she retorted, her voice ringing with the conviction of a warrior who had seen and inflicted much death. Her riders, bound to her by a shared ethos of war and conquest, laughed in agreement, their mirth a chilling soundtrack to the scene of devastation. It was then that Nazareth Lord made his presence felt. He had been observing the unfolding drama, his interest piqued by the clash of wills and ideologies. His arrival was not sudden, but a calculated emergence. His applause for Ahlai's iron resolve was both an acknowledgement of her strength and a subtle provocation, urging her to demonstrate the extent of her resolve. "Now," Ahlai proclaimed to the gathered crowd, her voice cutting through the tension, "let me finish, and then we'll discuss your new loyalty to the war band." Her words were a declaration of intent, a clear signal that she was not just fighting a battle, but also forging a new order from the ashes of the old. Axe arced through the air, aimed with lethal precision at the artist's neck. Samuel Andrews intervened with a swift and decisive parry. His action was a physical manifestation of his commitment to justice, a counterpoint to the cycle of violence that Ahlai embodied. Ahlai, taken aback by Samuel's unexpected defiance, stumbled backward. The standoff at the tavern, fraught with tension and the imminent threat of violence, was abruptly interrupted by an unexpected intervention. Father Edmund, a figure often shrouded in mystery and enigma, stood at the settlement's front gates, his presence commanding attention. His whisper, though soft, carried an undeniable urgency that resonated in the minds of all present. As the gathered warriors and survivors turned their gaze towards him, they were confronted with a sight that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The gates were open, revealing the vast, impenetrable abyss that lay beyond. The darkness seemed to stretch endlessly, a deep void where the familiar world once existed. This sight, more than any words, spoke volumes of the grave situation they were all in. In that moment, the petty squabbles and personal vendettas paled in comparison to the larger, more existential crisis at hand. The realization dawned on everyone, including Ahlai and her warband, Darren Loneswift, Samuel Andrews, and even the enigmatic Nazareth Lord. The world they knew, the lands they fought over, and the lives they led were perhaps irrevocably altered. High above, perched atop the highest tower in the settlement, Eden, still in her formidable beast shape, surveyed the endless darkness. Her heightened senses, even in this transformed state, could detect the profound shift that had occurred. The world as they knew it was no longer the same. The familiar landscapes, the bustling towns, the verdant forests, were now shrouded in an unfathomable darkness. This moment of revelation united them in a common cause, transcending their individual conflicts and ambitions. The true dilemma was now laid bare before them. The unknown state of their world, and the daunting task of navigating this new, uncharted reality. The abyss was not just a physical barrier. It represented the uncertainty, the fears, and the potential dangers of a world transformed by forces beyond their understanding. In the face of such overwhelming unknowns, old enmities and rivalries seemed insignificant. The need to understand this cataclysmic event became the paramount concern. The darkness was not just an external threat, but a test of their ability to come together in the face of a common adversary. The master plane.